Good morning, Emily. Comprehension activities and instruction are very different for kindergarten and second grade. Would you describe the approaches you would take for instruction for these two grades and let us know why those approaches are developmentally appropriate?
Of course. Comprehension activities and instruction for kindergarten and second grade differ for a variety of reasons. One main reason is related to a major developmental change that takes place between these two grades, known as the 5 to 7 shift. In kindergarten, students are working towards building the necessary foundations for effective comprehension skills. 5-year-olds are building their vocabulary and their knowledge of the world around them, as well as focusing on the basic structures of print and text. These youngsters are not yet reading independently, and because they need extra support in discovering meaning, I would focus my classroom practices on shared and interactive readings in whole group settings. This format that focuses on comprehension acquisition will provide students the opportunity to learn how they can pull meaning from literature. In this whole group format, I would make sure to select books for read-alouds that students could relate to. Since kindergartners have limited vocabulary and knowledge about the world, choosing books that they can connect with is critical to allowing them to find relevant meaning within the books. Kindergartners should also be encouraged to ask questions and search for picture cues in their reading. I would facilitate this by introducing books with book walks. This way, students can learn how to pull meaning from what they see and use that information to make predictions before they actually read the text. To assess comprehension acquisition in a kindergarten classroom, I will be sure to focus on exercises that encourage students to sequence story events, reenact plots, use new vocabulary, relate stories to their own lives, and make causal inferences about how things happened in a story. Students at this level should also start to understand that print can serve a variety of different purposes, and I will facilitate this knowledge by exposing students to a wide variety of print forms. By age 7, children have developed metacognitive skills that were not present in their kindergarten days. This means that they are able to think about their own thinking as well as understand the thought processes of others. Second graders are also not as concerned with learning about print itself, and therefore their memory and attention are much more freed up to build their own individual comprehension skills. Now, these students are free to understand what comprehension is rather than how to achieve it. Because of this developmental difference, accompanied by the fact that second graders are becoming independent readers, comprehension building in second grade looks drastically different than it did in kindergarten. First of all, reading practice in my second grade class would be structured in guided and independent reading activities in smaller groups or individually, rather than in shared and interactive reading. I would model comprehension strategies through several different methods, including reciprocal teaching, transactional strategies instruction, and concept-oriented reading instruction. All three of these comprehension strategies emphasize student engagement and interaction with text, and foster comprehension skills like activating prior knowledge, making predictions, clarifying, summarizing, and synthesizing information. In my second grade classroom, I would be sure to choose literature that would challenge my students to learn something new, but that would also be something that students could relate to in some capacity or another. Students could demonstrate their comprehension abilities through activities like comparing and contrasting different text or characters within text, giving oral reports that summarize and ask questions, and creating graphic organizers.
At our school, we have an increasing number of English language learners. How would you modify your instruction to promote their oral language development?
There are several techniques that can make oral language development accessible to English language learners. In a classroom with a high ELL population, I could use simple classroom management techniques to help support oral language development. I would make sure to have a well-developed schedule established in the beginning of the year so that students can feel comfortable being a part of a regular, scaffolded routine. I would make sure to have this schedule posted in the classroom, along with picture support that could represent and describe the daily routine. This way, students could become familiar not only with the schedule, but with words that label our routine. In my own spoken language, I would make sure that any instructions I give to the class are clear and explicit. Using few words and direct, uncomplicated language can be easier for ELL students to comprehend. I would also make an effort to eliminate idioms and phrases that only native English speakers can understand. During instruction, I would make sure to be repetitive, giving directions multiple times to allow students plenty of opportunity to piece together what they are hearing. Another instructional practice I would emphasize in my classroom would be offering visual support for as much instruction as possible. ELL students can reach understanding much faster if they have some sort of visual cue reminding them what it is they are supposed to be doing, or describing an activity they should be completing. Hands-on activities can also help reinforce instruction for ELL students by connecting action with language development. Another good way I could offer support for these students would be to pair each student with a native English speaker who is a good language model. This way, ELL students can listen to a peer who is speaking English and model their oral language after that friend. Sometimes working with peers for these students can be more accessible and less intimidating than always feeling dependent on a teacher or an English-speaking aide. This higher level of comfort could open up more and more opportunities for these children to develop their oral language. As a teacher, I would also be sure to be aware of the different ways that ELL students acquire English. Some students have an extended silent period where they will spend the first few months of their exposure to English simply listening as opposed to speaking. Then, as if out of nowhere, these students will start to speak English at a fairly proficient level, even though they have not been speaking it much beforehand. Other students will reach spoken English through mixing and combining their native languages with English, creating a sort of mishmash before they are able to differentiate between the two. Other students will quickly pick up on spoken English but will not be able to understand it. I would also make sure to understand the connections between a student's language and his or her culture, values, and attitudes. Language can tell teachers a lot about what a student's background might be like, and teachers need to be sensitive to that information, while also not letting cultural generalizations define students.
Emily, we have openings in preschool and in first grade. Would you please describe how you would address word-level instruction for both those grades? Are there any specific techniques or programs you feel should be introduced?
Sure. Since preschoolers are not at a level where they are doing very much reading, it can be easy to assume that teachers do not need to use word-level instruction in their pre-K classrooms. And in fact, word-level instruction is not something that is heavily emphasized at this level the way it is in older grades. However, it is not an area of instruction that should be forgotten. Word studies can be easily formatted so that they support oral language development and literacy overall with students at this age. As a preschool teacher, I would focus on several different components of word-level instruction. First, developing students' abilities to identify differences and similarities in sounds. Using activities that involve rhyme and alliteration, students can work on differentiating beginning and ending sounds. Preschoolers can use picture shorts to identify words that start the same or words that share similar endings. This can help build foundations for preschoolers to succeed in later word study activities, while also helping them to finesse their oral language development. Another area of word-level instruction that I could focus on with preschoolers is developing their concept of word. To students at this age, speech can often just sound like a constant stream of sounds pieced together in one big jumble. If preschoolers can start to pull apart words and be able to recognize that there is a one-to-one connection with word and speech, then they are on the right track in their literacy development. Students should also start to recognize that words can depict meaning. In the most basic format, I could do word studies that taught students that their written name corresponds to their spoken name, or that labels around the classroom, for example a sticker that says door or window, can tell them the names of things in their environment. In first grade, word-level instruction is becoming an increasingly important part of literacy development. Students at this level should be doing regular word sorts in the classroom and should be able to recognize an ever-expanding bank of sight words. As a teacher, I would establish in the very beginning of the year a consistent pattern of weekly word studies. Word studies for first grade would emphasize morphology of words, seeing if students can change phonemes to make new words, blend important sounds, and experiment with rhyme. I would also make sure to post in an easy-to-see spot a word wall that would include sight words that I expect my first grade students to know. I would make sure to add to and expand the word wall throughout the year, reviewing the newly posted words on a weekly or even daily basis. Other important areas that I would focus on in first grade would include counting out syllables in multisyllabic words and building confidence in piecing together compound words. One program that I would highly encourage incorporating into both preschool and first grade curriculums is the PALS assessment. This assessment tool can gauge where students are in their literacy development at both pre-K and first grade levels. Having this sort of information about my students would help me to tailor my instruction in my classroom so that it focuses on the specific word level needs of my students. In addition to addressing needs of the whole class, this assessment would also help me differentiate instruction for individual students in the class, and I feel it would be an effective tool for word level instruction.
Fantastic!